All right, so it appears that we are live. If you are here, let me know in the comments. I'm excited that we're getting back to live streams. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been able to do a live stream on the channel. If you don't know, I am Jonathan Cohn. I have this booktube channel. I talk about all things fantasy, sci-fi, Star Wars, Star Trek, political thriller, legal thriller, all types of books. So Nima is here. Howdy. Hello, Nima. Thank you for joining us. We also have Larry, who commented that Mike's Book Reviews has a live stream. Yeah, I didn't know that when I was planning, but it's okay. I'm sure people will catch this eventually. So if you have any questions, put them in the live chat, and I will be happy to talk about them, especially if they're book related. If you have comments also, I'd love to hear them. So I already have a few, so let's go ahead and get started. Mass Studios. Hello, Mass Studios. Good to see you again. Says hello. The Blue Pig says, would you say listening to music enhances or hinders the experience? Movie score music, not music with words. Interesting. So I'm in interesting position of I like total silence when I'm reading because I like to focus and I'm able to read much faster. That being said, there are instances where I do enjoy listening to a movie score, especially if it is a book that has a famous score. For instance, recently I was listening to the Hunger Games soundtrack. The Hunger Games audiobook, which I rarely do audiobooks, but I was doing that. And when I got to the scene where they go in they have the little parade, I stopped the audiobook and I went and I turned on the Horn of Plenty theme. And so I got to listen to both, which was kind of fun. And so sometimes I do that, but I don't want to do it too often because otherwise it'll be too much to do. But I definitely, whenever I'm writing something, I always listen to music when I'm writing because I'm much more creative that way, because I will oftentimes have ideas because of things that are happening in the music. So that's my answer there. Tristan Porter, hey, my friend, I've been enjoying your channel immensely. So thank you. Oh, thank you, Tristan. I'm glad that you're enjoying the channel. I am glad to be able to talk to more people about books and literature and other things book related, and ranking videos, all that fun stuff. The Oral Chum come. I looked up the video on how to pronounce your name, Spider, and I watched it a couple of times, and I still get it wrong. So I'm just going to call you Spider. What villain would you have dinner with? What villain? Okay, I would love to have dinner with Tywin Lannister. I love Tywin. He's so awesome. His personality is so great, how he's just dripping with like anger at his children and how he's so holier than thou. I would like to have dinner with Tywin. I would also like to have dinner with the Emperor so that we could talk about long-term planning, like how he took some very little and made a whole lot out of his empire. So I think that would be lots of fun. Nima says, yes, thank you so much for your channel, Jonathan. Your content is awesome. Oh, thank you, Nima. That's so kind. Mass Studios has been watching your channel for a month now. Thank you for the amazing content. Thank you. A lot of people are going back and finding my backlog. And what's really interesting is recently I've always had 2 videos that have always just dominated. And those are still doing really well, but my other videos are my fantasy in particular is really starting to take off again, which I'm really happy about because I really like fantasy and I want more people to find it. So I am glad that more people are finding this channel. Thank you, Blue Pig. Blueberry Comics says, hello, fate hasn't led me to be a part of these live streams except for the second one, but now here I am for half an hour. I'll have to go later. Oh, that's totally fine. Most people, in fact, actually just watch the live streams later, which I find is really interesting. But I'm glad that you're here now, Blueberry Comics. You've been with us for a while. I'm looking to any questions you have. Unlikely Ally says, hello, Jonathan. Glad to make it, but have not been able to stay. Have you been hearing about the Penguin Random House and Simon & Schuster antitrust trial? Yes, I have. So this is really interesting, this trial, because I am of 2 minds of it. I have one mind that is, it would be very terrible for the industry for the 2 to combine. It would cause repercussions that would be just really bad in publishing. But I don't think that there should be a legal reason for them to have to stay separated. I think that legally it makes sense for one to buy out another, but I realize that if it does happen, it's going to be really bad. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I really am interested that they're planning to bring Stephen King before Congress. That's a big deal. But it is. I always like the business back end, and I looking up how many books they publish, and you see how Simon and Schuster's pretty much the number 2, and then you have Random House, which is way up here in the number of books that they're publishing. So yeah, it's been interesting. Blueberry Comics also says this month has been great thus far. Xenos was awesome. Age of Assassins was entertaining, but my friend read And Then There Were None, so it's worth it. Oh, And Then There Were None is so good. It's so worth it. Really enjoy. And Then There Were None. I see someone. Jozu, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Rostro says dinner with Martian Rowe. Yeah, that would be an interesting dinner. He's also one of those that has been planning things for a long time, and so I like the idea of talking about how you laid the groundwork and worked your way up to controlling a lot of a power. So next comment is from Unlikely Ally. LOL, I'm dying about how much you'd enjoy dinner with the Emperor. Ha! Glad you enjoyed that. He said, Unlike says, yeah, King is published by them and he's speaking against. Yeah, it makes sense. Other authors have talked about it. Most authors are a little bit afraid. No one wants to criticize it because they don't want to tempt the wrath from the whatever from high atop the thing. But yeah, if it happens, it happens. But it's not great if it happens. But I don't have like a legal problem with it. The next comment is from Mass Studios. I know this is not really book related, but what do you think about the Lord of the Rings Rings of Power TV series? Personally, I'm really excited for it. I'm really interested in it, and I will watch it. I'm a little bit apprehensive because there's some things in it I'm not particularly huge fan of, and if I'm adapting something, I want it to be beat for beat exactly like a book. So adapting something like this makes me a bit nervous, but still, I am interested in watching it. The visuals look great. I think they have Howard Shore still involved, so the soundtrack is probably going to be good. So I'm excited. I'm just a little bit apprehensive. I'm cautiously optimistic is what I'll say. The next comment says from Nima, have you read any of Keith DeCandido's Star Trek novels, namely Diplomatic Implausibility? I highly recommend if you haven't. That is one I haven't read. That's one of those he did earlier on, in the early 2000s when they were shorter books. I have read a couple of his. He did write the books A Time for War, A Time for Peace, which ended the A Time 2 series, which was really good. And then he wrote the utterly spectacular book, Articles of the Federation, which is one of the best Star Trek novels as a single novel. It's brilliant. It's The West Wing meets Star Trek. It's brilliant. So I've read those 2 novels of his, and then I have A Singular Destiny on my shelf to read eventually, but I have not yet gotten to it. It'll probably be sometime in this fall or in the winter. And those are the only books I have of his at the moment. But they have a bunch of his books at the bookstore, but they don't have the first books of his series that he wrote for Star Trek, like the beginning of his Klingon books. So I can't really get into those. But from what I've read 2 books of his, and they were both stellar. So he's got 2 for 2 for me. Let's see. Nanga Aboko says, I'm really looking forward to Princess and the Scoundrel. When you do your review, will you compare it to Courtship of Princess Leia? I think that's inevitable. I think everyone is just about going to compare the 2. I've always said I'm a huge Dave Farland fan. Most of the books on this side are all his novels, and they're some of my favorite novels of all time. So I love Dave Farland. He wrote in Star Wars under the name Dave Wolverton, and he wrote Courtship of Princess Leia, and I personally did not love it, but that's just me. So I don't mind that we're getting a different version of it. And there's still Courtship of Princess Leia, still not necessarily the Courtship of Princess Leia. It's a very different type of story than you'd expect it to be. So I'm interested to see how they do it this time. Raffenti, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, says, how do you feel about audiobooks in general? For you personally, does it heighten or appreciate the experience, or is it merely a substitute? So my general rule is I listen to audiobooks only if I've actually read the novel. So if I'm doing a reread, I'll do the audiobook. The real rule is because I read faster than audiobook narrators, and I get frustrated because I just want to know what happens. I'm just trying to get the story. I want to find out what happens. And this audiobook narrators just go so slow. Even when I speed it up, they're still too slow for me. So and when you speed up too much, it gets unintelligible, even if I can read that fast. So that's a bit of a problem. But if I'm doing a reread, I already know what happens. I'm just here for the atmosphere, for the enjoyment. So my favorite books, Elantris, Warbreaker, Kenobi, those types of books I'll reread on audiobooks, that type of thing, because I love the book so much and I already know what happens. So I'm not worried about it. But I don't generally do them as a first read. But I know a lot of my friends who are big readers, they have trouble reading a physical copy. So I'm all for them doing the audiobook if that works for them. Patrick Rogue says, have you read the Witcher novels? No, I have not. It's just not a fandom or a book series that's like particularly drawn me in, but I like media tie-in fiction, and it's not exactly that because the books technically came first before the video game and before the TV show. But I'm interested in reading them one day, but it's not a style that I'm particularly excited for, and I have so many fantasy series in front of it in line of what I want to read. So it's one of those, I will get to it one day. I just can't promise it'll be soon. So the next one from Blueberry Comics says, you've read it. What I meant was you should read it. Haha, that ending though, that ending. I'm missing what you're referring to. Blueberry Comics, I'm sorry. Says, any thoughts on the epics? Gilgamesh, Homer, Beowulf. I tried reading Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. It was interesting, but it was the writing style was just a bit odd. Beowulf, also interesting. It didn't really rhyme, which is what didn't work for me. Like, I'm all for epic poems. Like Tolkien, he can write epic poems that rhyme, but Beowulf didn't. And then Gilgamesh, haven't read it, but we talk about it in my history class, so I've read like a piece of it, like a couple paragraphs, but not a lot. The next comment, let's see, is from the Blue Pig. Have you read Lucasfilm's Alien Chronicles? They were going to be Star Wars books originally, but then they got canceled and adapted to the Alien Chronicles. Interesting. I had not heard of that, and that's an interesting backstory for them. That alone, that pitch of them being Star Wars books that were adapted into something else, that intrigues me. I like those types of things, so I'm interested in. I'll have to put that on my list. Master says, I didn't know that Howard Shore was involved with a series. I read it. It was a few months ago that I read that article that said he was involved. Blueberry Comics, do you have any pets? No, I do not. I am way too busy to have a pet at the moment. I had one like when I was younger that my parents took over when I went to college, and then they still have the dog, although she's probably not going to live too much longer because she's like 11 now. But no, I don't have any at the moment. But when I do, I will get a great big dog, probably a golden doodle, even if it's expensive, because golden doodles are amazing. I love them. Unlikely Ally. Speaking of adaptations, I really loved the Sandman adaptation. Have you seen it? Did you read the comic? Do you read comics in general? I don't really read comics that much. I do want to get into Neil Gaiman because everyone recommends him. I just don't think I'm going to mesh with his style, but maybe I will. And so I haven't read Sandman comics. I've read some. Like, I've read about a dozen bind-ups of comics that have like 6 issues. I've read about a dozen of those. So I've read some comics, but I'm not proficient in them. And my first and foremost focus is prose, specifically novels, and then short story collections. So I haven't really gotten into them, but I do know like Robert Meyer Burnett on John Campea. He loved the Sandman adaptation, which piqued my interest because he's not always saying a TV show is the best. Spider says, have you read the Winterlands series by Barbara Hambly? No, but I am trying to find a Barbara Hambly book. I am trying to find a copy of her book that about, I forgot the name of it. It's the one that has the dragon that Brandon Sanderson read as a kid that made him into a reader. I know the name and I have it written down. I just am blanking on the moment. I go to the bookstore and look for it every week and it's never there. And I know it's online, but it seemed pretty marked up. So I was like, I don't want to buy that yet. So, but I haven't heard of the Winterland series, but apparently Barbara Hambly has some fans. So I would be interested in reading it. Blueberry Comics says, thoughts on Dragon Bone Chair thus far? I checked your Goodreads progress and you're about where I stopped. I'm thinking of retrying. So I was actually right before, like 2 minutes before I started the live stream, I was reading it. I am trying to get through it. It is a slow burn, and it is very much prose flowery language heavy. So it's focused on that beautiful writing style, which some people love, and I get it, but there's so little happening. And 150 pages ago, I knew exactly where we were going, and I was like, can we just get there already? So I'm enjoying when there is plot. I'm loving the plot, and the political intrigue is great, but there's so little of it in comparison to just world building and walking around and discussion of Simon's character. So it has the potential, and once we get to in there, I will be really excited. But we haven't gotten to more yet, so whenever we get to that point, I will get more excited. Joe Williams says, hi, Jonathan. I'm a newbie to Star Wars novels. Is there a definitive list I can get the collection bug while reading them? Thank you for the response. So if you're just talking about a general list of all the novels, the best place to go is Wikipedia. Wikipedia is great. You can filter if you just want to read the adult novels, don't want to read any YA or anything, or you can filter just by YA novels, or you can filter by middle grade. They're great. They're great archivists for the Star Wars stuff. Even the Lucasfilm people sometimes use Wikipedia because it's so good. That being said, there are other places. If you get a book with the Legends banner on it, let's see if I can find one real quickly. If you find a novel that has the Legends banner, that means it was printed. This copy was printed after they had ended the EU Legends line. So it'll have a complete list of the adult novels in here. So that's an easy way if you're talking about the EU. And then if you're talking about a canon novel, because they're still coming out, it's really hard to just have an updated list. But again, Wikipedia is the best place for that. So that's what my recommendation would be. Refenti says, the latest audiobook for Thrawn Lesser Evil is 23 hours. Yes, it is long. The Thrawn Lesser Evil is the longest novel in the canon, and it is the second longest novel in Star Wars. It is only beat out by another Timothy Zahn novel, which is Visions of the Future, which is just a tad bit longer. But it is a long book, and it's still shorter than most epic fantasy novels like Wheel of Time or Brandon Sanderson or others, or even some of the So it's a long book, but it's manageable. It's manageable, and I thought it was such a good story that it just read that quickly. I was able to read it in 3 days, but I read much faster than most people do. So let's see the next comments. Unlikely Ally. I listen to audiobooks while I work, drive, and clean the house. Otherwise, I prefer the physical copy. Yeah, I've been setting up my classroom for the last week, and so I've just been working by myself in there. And so I had two options. I could turn on music, or I could turn on an audiobook. And I was like, I'm the only one person in there, so I'll turn on an audiobook. Although I've gotten some weird looks when people walk in and they just hear a voice in there. They're like, what's happening? Lazy Fishy. That's an interesting name. Hi, Jonathan. I started reading because of you, and I'm really enjoying it. What book or books do you recommend for the Old Republic? I love the Bane trilogy, and I'm reading Revan now. So that's what everyone else would recommend. I personally love John Jackson Miller's novel that he wrote, Knight Errant. It is an excellent novel. It is doesn't have many fans, but I loved it. It has a lot of allusions to communism, whereas you have communism in Russia is different from communism in China. You have different types of Sith that have different ways of ruling. It's a very interesting comparison in here. There's also a great all of John Jackson Miller's novels explore the themes of what should a Jedi do when they have no one else in the order to help them. And he does. This was his first ever novel. It's his debut, and I think it's one of his weakest. It's his weakest individual novel, but it's still really entertaining. There was also I read Deceived, which I thought was fine, and then I read Fatal Alliance, which was really entertaining, but it wasn't a favorite. But Fatal Alliance is a good one, and Knight Errant, I would also say. If you played the video game, The Old Republic, then I would say Deceived, because it had so many tie-ins to the video game. In fact, there was one scene, I was like, I'm pretty sure this is just a cut scene from the video game that they added in. So that's where I would go if you want Old Republic. If you like the concept of older Republic, like prequel stuff, the High Republic in the canon has been really entertaining. The adult novels and the middle grade. The YA, which is in between, that stuff's not been great. But the adult and middle grade of the High Republic has also been very entertaining. Arya, hyped for the new Game of Thrones show coming out August 21st. Yes, House of the Dragon comes out. I'm very excited. I am really interested to see where it goes. I have not read Fire and Blood yet because I was told it's like the Silmarillion, but for Game of Thrones, and I will read it sometime. But I'm interested in seeing how they adapt this, and